All right. So it says that we're live. I have 11:59 on my end. We got a few people already in the waiting room. So hopefully they can hear us now. So I'm just going to type into the chat. Um, and welcome everybody to our Wisconsin Saltwise Wednesday webinar. It is August 6th right now. Pretty sunny day. I think like not as smoky as it has been in southern Wisconsin. I don't know how much smoke you guys got in Iowa, but has been a little bit of a bummer on the summer. So, my name is Allison Madison. I am the program manager at Wisconsin Saltwise, and I'm very excited to have Jim Scott with me today to give a presentation that he recently gave at the American Public Works Snow Conference in Grand Rapids. So that's where Jim and I connected, and he said that he'd be willing to represent his story. And I thought it would be an excellent one to get out through the Saltwise community. So if you've joined any of our webinars before, you know the drill, but there were a few new people on the registration list. So I want to just reiterate that if you have any questions or comments for Jim, it's always fun to hear a little bit from the audience. You can type those into the YouTube chat. And then when Jim's done presenting, I'll read those questions aloud or comments. If for any reason the YouTube chat doesn't work, you can just email me directly at wisaltwise@gmail.com and I'll put that into the chat. So I think that's all we need to go over ahead of time. So Jim, if you want to share your screen, I'll just kind of keep my audio on until your slides are up. Looks like it's translating and looks perfect. Great. All right, Jim, you can take it away.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. It's like, well, I guess it's afternoon now. Good afternoon. As Allison said, my name is Jim Scott. I'm the operations manager for the City of Des Moines Public Works Streets Department. And some of my responsibilities is winter operations, snow ops, and preparing for those and getting everything ready as far as equipment, personnel, training, materials, salt, calcium chloride, brine, whatever that might entail for our winter operations. And of course, you guys know that in public works, failure is not an option. So we have to always operate from the premise that we're going to win in the battle of all these storms to serve our customer base and to give them safe travels on the infrastructure as soon as possible. A little bit of my background. I've only been with the city of Des Moines as the operations manager for 2 years. Before that, I was the area supervisor for Iowa Department of Transportation for the Des Moines metro area west. So where the river runs through downtown, everything west of that would have been my area of responsibility. And I operated in that capacity for 13 years and helped to develop a lot of innovation that the state still uses and some of it that we're using here at the city now. Before I was with the Iowa Department of Transportation, I was a project superintendent for PCI, a heavy highway company out of Rhinebeck area, Iowa. And I did that for years before I went to the state. So our agenda today is I want to focus on discussing proactive methods of ice and snow control. This is not going to be an exact replica of what I presented at the snow conference, but a lot of this is taken out of that. And I want to teach you guys and discuss how you can infuse technology with innovation, how you can fit your equipment for your operations. Everybody has different abilities. They have different technology. They have different scope of roadways and equipment that they use. So there is a way that you can take a cross section and retrofit your operations. I'm talking materials, equipment, and personnel specifically for your roadway system and your operational capability. And we're also going to talk about an accelerated ongoing training and mentoring program, which is very vital to the overall long-term success, especially with the turnover in public works these days. And saving salt and offering a better service to your customers while you're saving salt, and it's less impact on the environment. You will offer a better service in less time. You'll reduce your risk because your equipment, your personnel will be on the infrastructure for less hours, and it's quicker cleanup at the end of the storm. So every public works division can save salt. And most of you guys that's been around public works for a while know this already, but those of you that don't, uh, some of the rule of thumb in the old days were you just put salt out in as much as you need it to begin to melt the snow and ice. Well, about 15 years ago at Iowa DOT, it was a policy that every bit of salt had to be pre-wetted that was placed on the roadway because brine or brine infused with liquid calcium chloride is what activates the salt. So we began to do that. About 12 years ago, we started experimenting with spray bars. And out of my operations in Grimes, we had spray bars that sprayed the brine or brine calcium chloride infused on the roadway, and then your spinner or your ZVs would dump the salt on top of the brine. That activates the bottom of the salt. That's a better scenario. But what I've developed with Henderson here at the city is we've got a spinner system now that throws the salt right under the spray bar, and it activates every granule of salt almost instantly. So when you don't pre-wet or wet your salt, about 60 to 70% of your salt either blows off the road or gets blown off by traffic. And the only thing you're doing is melting snow and ice on the forest slopes and the ditch bottoms. And that's because it's dry, it blows around real easy, and it's not being activated. It can take up to 45 minutes for dry salt to start melting enough snow or ice to where it actually activates. So no matter the size or scope of your operation, you can infuse these proven methods that will work for you. But I want to remind you, it's like PPE or a seatbelt. It only works if you use it. And the system does work. You have to trust the process and just implement the process, and you will be effective. So to share this information with you and your staff and your crews, I'm hopefully going to give you a cross section of what you can take back and begin to implement based off of what your needs are with the equipment, the personnel and the staff and the materials that you have at hand to use at your disposal. And I want to answer any and all of your questions and get you started on your way to a more effective winter capability and overall operations. So how do you begin? Well, the first thing you got to do is figure out where you are now. And the way that we do that at the city is we generate what's called a post-storm report off our GPS mapping. And that post-storm report will tell us how many trucks we had on the infrastructure, how many equipment hours we had on the infrastructure, how many man hours we had on the infrastructure, how much salt we used per truck on the infrastructure, how much brine we used on the infrastructure, and how much calcium chloride. And then we begin to break that down line by line based off if it's a primary route or a neighborhood route or a very low travel B road or unincorporated road. Then the level of service kind of goes down a little bit because of the amount of vehicles it's going to travel down on a daily basis. So part of what we did was we had to come up with a proactive method of training personnel, not only existing personnel, but the heavy turnover and the winter temp help that you get in the winter times. So we come up with an idea as our winter steering committee. How about if we started producing our own videos, technical safety, means and methods training, vendor sharing information with us? We'll make these things last 6 to 10 minutes so their eyes don't glaze over in the morning meeting, and they'll see people they know using equipment they use on the infrastructure that they work on. That's a great concept. So we begin to develop this, and what you're looking at now, each one of these is a different training segment that we had put together and shot videos of it. And it's our own people starring in these, and they're teaching and sharing information that's vital to the success of our winter operations. So salt saving, I'm going to show you this. A lot of people would not be willing to do this, but I am going to do this. This is a new system that I worked with Henderson on to develop. And this is the next generation spray bar system. So it throws the salt right under the spray bar, and these spray nozzles saturate the salt as it hits the roadway. So where you was using 400 or 500 pounds per lane mile, now you can use 100 to 200 pounds per lane mile, and it does not take any more than that. And if it's snowing heavy, I recommend you only trickle out a little bit of salt and you just plow until you get towards the end of the evolution of the storm. Then you begin to treat the roads. And this system right here, once it's activated and wetted, you're going to see almost an instant response. And within a half hour, you're going to see a drastic difference in the road conditions. If any of you guys have any desire to learn more about this, the pricing and how we developed it and how you can infuse something like this, get a hold of me. My contact information will be at the end. So I want to spend most of my time answering questions and talking about strategies, means and methods. How do you train your people, equipment setup, storage of materials, best practices on materials. Uh, and so with that, Allison, I'm going to open it up for any questions that anybody would like to ask.
All right. Thank you, Jim. So we'll give people a minute to type some questions into the chat, and I'll also try to keep an eye on my email as well. There's a little bit of a delay and I gotta go back and forth. But while we wait for some questions from folks who are on right now, I do have a question about what if people right now don't have much liquid capacity? So I feel like we've got a lot of people who maybe, have like those 100-gallon tailgate tanks. So how do
Sure.
they look at trying, moving to something like this with, I guess, do you want to share what rates? Because you talked about your granular rates going down from, not 400, we're down to like between 1 and 200 pounds a lane mile, but I'm assuming then your liquid rates are pretty high. So do you know how many gallons per lane mile or gallons per ton?
Yeah, as a rule, we're putting out 20 to 30 gallons per lane mile of brine.
Mhm.
And if it, depending upon the threshold of the temperature, how cold it is, if we're down dancing around 10, 12 degrees and it's dropping, then we're
Mhm.
going to infuse 10% liquid
Calcium.
calcium chloride. Never use flake calcium chloride.
Hmm.
It's a nightmare.
Hmm.
Uh, and I can explain that a little to you more. What happens is flake calcium chloride is a solid mineral. Liquid calcium chloride is never a solid, it's a liquid. and it comes from Mineral Springs. I believe it's from the upper UP is where we get it from.
Okay.
And so its natural habitat, it's constituted as a liquid. Flake calcium chloride is a solid, and you mix it in with brine to turn it into a liquid. But when you spray it on the road, anytime after the end of the storm that it drops below 32 degrees, calcium chloride attracts moisture. So that
Mhm.
stuff will attract moisture and it'll refreeze, and you'll
Mhm.
be out there fighting refreeze in areas where it hasn't snowed.
Mhm.
So depending upon the humidity. So there are a lot of bad elements to the liquid are the flake calcium chloride, and that's why we went away from it. We used to use the beet juice, but with the spray bar system, because the beet juice has so many particles in it, it clogs the spray
Mhm.
bars and it's bad on the pumps. So we went strictly to the liquid calcium chloride infused in the brine.
Mhm.
Now, our setup is digital, it's computerized. So we put in the truck number, what the tank capacity is, and then when you pull up there, you push in the truck number and it'll give you the options, fill to 100%. And if you have liquid in your tank and you push fill to 100%, you're going to overflow your tank. So you have to be able to reverse engineer the math and make sure you're putting in the right information. And I think there are a few of our people from our winter steering committee on this um, presentation, and they would be more than glad to share information with anybody that needed it as well. One of the things that we found at the state of Iowa was the amount of time that it took to clean up at the end of a storm. And especially if there was, we had the busiest interstate roadways in the state of Iowa in the Des Moines metro area. So you get to the end of the storm and there's so much traffic, it packs the snow into ice. And brine and salt is really hard to activate to break that adhesion between the ice and the roadway, where the liquid calcium chloride is exothermic, which simply means it's a chemical reaction. When it's sprayed on there, like flake calcium chloride in concrete, it gets hot. So it sets up faster and it sets up harder. It's the same application. You spray that on there, it gets hot, it breaks the ice loose, and you shove it off the roadway. Where it used to be in the old days, we'd rub on that stuff with underbodies and ice blades for sometimes days at a time, depending upon how thick that buildup was. And that's completely eliminated. We don't deal with that anymore
Mhm.
because we go out there and we put the hot liquid on it, breaks it loose. We come back through and about an hour later, plow it all off, and you go back to your normal cleanup operations.
Mhm. Yeah, I think you hit a couple of key points there with calcium, right? Like it does have the ability those colder temperatures, but also it's more hygroscopic than
Yes,
sodium chloride is. So I often refer to calcium chloride and somewhat magnesium chloride as sodium chloride's big bad cousins. Like they're the guys you don't really want to mess with at the family reunion, right? Like they can get the job done, but in more ways than one. So I think a lot of people have experience with putting calcium on gravel roads because it's a dust suppressant, right? It does grab that moisture, as you mentioned, and bring it down to the road, which is great in the summer, right? To reduce dust, but not something we want to do in the wintertime. So you mentioned, Jim, beet juice. Could you just share a little bit when you said beet juice? I'm assuming that's you were using it as an additive, not straight beet juice on
correct.
salt.
Yeah, we use beet juice infused with brine. Uh, and it was the same application. The problem is this is really important that your post-storm cleanup process, as much effort is put into that as put into preparation and actually fighting your storm, because that's where you're going to take care of the equipment that's going to work for you the next storm. And so we was having to take stuff apart at the state and remove spray bars and put salt away, run salt away through them because it was clogging up nozzles, it was clogging up pumps. And so we started flushing them with RV antifreeze fluid. It was just a constant battle. And we didn't have that with liquid calcium chloride. So
Hmm.
we went away from that. Plus the fact that on the interstate in Des Moines metro area, folks were throwing a fit because their cars were turning purple,
Hmm.
because it does leave kind of purplish haze out there. And so we made a decision based off our operational scope to go away from that and go to the liquid calcium chloride. I've never used the magnesium chloride, so I don't have no expertise in that area, but I know it costs a lot more money.
Hmm.
So back to your question about the brine. If you have very little brine capabilities, there are some programs throughout a lot of the salt belt states that will help you. They'll do like matches to get brine containment. Some states require that you have a wall around that or sandbags or something that if you have a spill that you have a containment spill uh, containment there. But there are ways that you can get help financially to begin to infuse brine into your system. And if you can afford to put out 400 or 500 pounds per lane mile of salt, you can't afford not to start using brine. Because if you're using brine, brine cost us about 5 cents a gallon to make.
Hmm.
And salt cost us about 69 bucks a ton delivered. So it doesn't take Einstein to figure out that the mathematics are definitely tracking towards brine. And so the brine systems is something that we do in-house. We use our own hydrometers to measure the salt content in it. Some of them are digital that you use a little eyedropper and you drop it on there and it's going to tell you the exact salt content. And you're doing this based off batches. So you don't want to draw 2 or 3 test tubes off of the same truckload. You want to do it spread out so you're getting a good cross section of what you have.
Hmm.
But the brine will activate your salt and you're going to have a lot better success in the short term and the long term with your overall storm operational ability.
Hmm. It's really interesting that you're able to make brine for such a small amount of money per gallon. I think in Wisconsin, the if people just look at the cost of the salt, which also salt does cost more in Wisconsin as a whole than what you just quoted there. And I think part of that's the transportation cost to get it to Wisconsin, maybe versus Iowa. But people are on average paying around $90 a ton for salt. But then brine, like I said, the cheapest I've heard, if you just look at the salt content, it's like 11, 12 cents a gallon. But most like county shops, when they look at full cost of the water, the salt, the electricity, the staff time to make the brine, it's in like 20 to 30 cents a gallon.
Sure.
But still, it's a lot of savings. I think what I run into is if people don't have the equipment to utilize the brine, trying to convince their town boards, their city, you know, whoever holds the purse strings to say like, yeah, I'm going to write out a check for X amount, right? Like that capital investment is a harder sell than just like the maintenance that people see um, for that salt. So I'm curious, do you know, you mentioned that there are grants available. I guess in Wisconsin, we don't really have any that I'm aware of, but do you
Okay.
know, are there regional or are there in Iowa, the state of Iowa, are there grant
Yes.
programs?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
You can reach out to Iowa DOT and they will direct you to who you would need to get a hold of. And also, I would say this uh, a lot of the smaller cities, Johnston, Grimes, Dallas Center, they would buy brine from Iowa DOT. They'd
Hmm.
come directly to my facility and buy the brine from us because they didn't have the capacity to make it or store it. So
Hmm.
that's always an option. If there
Hmm.
is a municipality or a state agency around you that does have that brine capability, normally they sell it to you for what it costs them to make it.
Hmm.
And so you're not losing anything
Hmm.
because you're getting it for their cost, and they have to
Hmm.
store it and pay the electrical and the water and the salt and the personnel,
Hmm.
as you said.
Yeah.
So that'd be a good place to start and do a pilot. And what I'd say is I would pick an area and do a test on it. Use the
Hmm.
brine, uh, salt backed up with the brine. And if you don't have the spray bars, just pre-wet it and put as much brine on as you can, as your trucks have the capability to
Hmm.
pre-wet, whether that be, 8 gallons per lane mile, 10, 15, whatever that is, without overheating the hydraulics and overworking the system. And then measure the success as compared to just putting salt out there bare.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely think the pilot program is a great way to go. I am pretty jealous that, yeah, in Iowa, it sounds like you guys have a pot of money. Wisconsin DOT does, because they don't do winter maintenance, that it's all farmed out to the individual counties. They have supported the county highway departments to get brine makers. So a lot of them have taken advantage of that. I think 60 some of the 72 counties at this point, but there aren't those funds kind of for municipalities. But we do have a lot of municipalities that have been able to work with counties or smaller municipalities working with larger munis to get brine. I think it just becomes that we don't have the equipment to apply it, how to wait till we have an ability to upgrade the fleet or truck by truck, right? I wanted to ask, you mentioned, Jim, GPS mapping. What platform or company do you go with for that information?
Right now, we're using Fleet Pass, and we're taking a look at the next contract that will come up for bid next year. I know at State of Iowa, we use Cypress, and there are a lot of really good positive things you can get out of that. And so I'll touch on a few of them. Let's say somebody says your snow plow threw a rock up and busted my window at this location at this time. Well, GPS is going to tell you if that truck was there. Oftentimes, it might be a contractor doing snow removal, or it might be a county, or like Polk County, or it might be Iowa DOT. And because they were driving around in the city of Des Moines, they automatically think that it was a city truck that did it. But we have state highways that go through our city,
Mhm.
and there's 5 or 6 of them that run right through the city that the state plows. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is if you hover over the truck with your mouse, it's going to tell you how fast it's going, what the salt rate is per lane mile, what the brine rate is, and if it's infused with calcium. So you know every pound of salt and every gallon of liquid that's being put on that infrastructure, and you're able to hover. I mean, when you got 100 trucks on the infrastructure, to run reports to look at what they're putting out there is an unrealistic expectation. So we requested a fleet pass that they give us this hover option, and that is supposed to go live here real soon, and that's going to be an added bonus for us. So one of our technical support, uh, Lisa, she does the post-storm reports, and then we go through the analyticals. We're not going to do this on nickel and dime storms. We don't have the time. But on
Mhm.
larger major snowstorms, we want to go through the analyticals, do what's known as a post-storm report, talk about areas of the city that we had great success, other areas that maybe we needed a little more help, say in odds and evens, or we had to use snow blowers mounted on loaders to buck snow back because it was drifting in the roadways. There's certain things that we can talk about. What was our time frame? Was our reaction right? Did we have the right personnel in the right place at the right time? Were we using the right tools? Did we have the right materials out there? Well, what adjustments do we need to make, if any? And that's kind of like an after action. You sit down
Mhm.
in house with your own people, almost like you're doing an after action for a major event like a tornado, except you're not meeting with fire and police and rescue and all the different municipalities. You're meeting with your own people, and you're just simply having a discussion to try to learn about yourself in your operational scope and where you might be missing something at a crucial time. It's never to beat people up. You're not going to build a team that way. It's always as a learning opportunity and to support and build one another up.
Great. Yeah, I like that. And I mean, I think that aligns with your training videos, right? Where you said these are videos with, your colleagues in them, as those local experts sharing what's going on and kind of building that team camaraderie, morale, and knowledge base all at the same time. Are any of those videos, I guess, are they available online for others who might be interested to kind of take a look?
Yeah, they are on YouTube. And
Okay.
you can go to the City of Des Moines Public Works slash YouTube, and there's a whole bunch of different videos there. But our PIO, he's on vacation this week. I can have him reach out to you, Allison, and he'll give you a link to where just this specific setup that we have here is called Training Thursdays. And so every other Thursday, we use like 15 minutes after the morning menu, and we announce any important announcement that people need to know. And then we show one of the training videos and we simply talk about it for a couple of minutes. Um, Mack trucks, Allison transmissions, um, Force America control heads. How do you zero out storm totals? How do you change application rates? How do you change materials? How do you add liquid? How do you add liquid infused with brine in there? Because if you don't change, if you go from just salt to salt and brine and then salt and brine to calcium chloride, if you don't change that in control head, it's not tracking it. It's tracking whatever you dial into that head. And then our numbers start to get further and further off, and then you have to reverse engineer and find out what went wrong, and that's very time consuming. So to train your people well on the front end, to make it to where they can train others, they know this stuff well enough to train other people, then you are implementing a mentor system and they don't even realize they're doing it.
Mhm. I love that. I did go onto your YouTube channel. There's a lot of videos that the city of Des Moines has beyond the training videos, but I did find one that was related. It seems like it was more a video for the public to learn about snow ops. And I think it said like, don't follow too close behind the snowplow, but I
Yeah,
dropped
I
that into the chat for people.
I think this is our director, Jonathan Gano. He does a really great job. He's a good communicator, just an all-around good guy, and he supports us in what we're trying to accomplish here. I mean, obviously, we don't want to be marginal at what we do because
Mhm.
anybody can accomplish that. We want to have overall excellence with consistency, and the only way that that's going to happen as a manager when you have 100 people that you're managing is to have them train well enough and treat it well enough, then empower them and trust them to do their job. And if they have
Mhm.
problems, then we go try to help them solve their problems and steer them in the right direction. Don't ever beat them up, though. They're out there trying to do a job, and unless they're being negligent or egregious in some way or another, then you deal with that as it comes. But for the most part, we want to have a positive spin on everything and to treat people as the professionals they are and give them respect. And normally, when that happens, they'll do more than what's expected of them.
Like that. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions coming in through the chat or online. I know you did put your email in the on the presentation, Jim. So I think people want to reach out directly afterwards, they can do that. We, I'm sure we'll have some folks watching this afterwards, not everybody. Okay, there you go. Perfect. The JR Scott at dmgov.org.
Yep, if
But
you need to get a hold of me, there's my contact information. You can shoot me an email, and I will certainly try to work with you to help you any way that I can.
awesome. And also, Jim will be at PWX in Chicago. So if you are headed that way, you can meet him in the flesh there. But excellent. Well, thank you so much, Jim. I really appreciate it today. And yeah, hope you enjoy the rest of your week and
Well,
safe
thank you,
travels.
Allison, and it's a pleasure to work with you. Have a great day.